The studio lights were blinding. Millions of viewers across America watched as cameras zoomed in on the stage, where one of the nation's most popular daytime talk shows was broadcasting live. Everything was going according to schedule. Until it wasn't. At exactly 2:17 p.m., in front of a live audience, national sponsors, and millions watching from home, executive producer Daniel Whitmore pointed toward a tall black man standing near camera 3 and said into his headset, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Get him off my floor. Right now." The room went silent. 3 security guards immediately started moving. The cameras quickly cut to a commercial break. And standing under the bright studio lights, still holding his production clipboard, Marcus Reed realized that after 8 years of loyal service, he was being fired on live television. What nobody inside that studio knew was that less than 24 hours later, those same executives would be desperately calling Marcus, begging him to come back. Because without him, the entire network was about to collapse. If stories like this stay with you, subscribe and follow along. There are many more like it. Marcus Reed had never planned on working in television. At 41 years old, he had spent most of his adult life solving problems other people didn't even notice. During his 20s, he had served in the Army as a communications specialist, coordinating emergency systems under pressure. After leaving the military, he worked a series of technical jobs before eventually joining Horizon Studios, one of the largest television production companies on the East Coast. He started at the bottom, very bottom, cable management, equipment transport, set preparation, cleaning stages after broadcasts. The jobs nobody wanted, the jobs nobody remembered. But Marcus had something many people in television didn't. He paid attention. He noticed everything. Which camera occasionally overheated, which microphone failed without warning, which lighting panel flickered whenever humidity rose above 70%, which producers panicked under pressure, which executives blamed others for their own mistakes. Over 8 years, Marcus became the unofficial problem solver for the entire building. Officially, he was still listed as a senior floor technician. Unofficially, half the studio couldn't function without him. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it out loud. Especially not Daniel Whitmore. Daniel was 53, sharply dressed, permanently irritated, and obsessed with appearances. As executive producer of America Today Live, Horizon's highest-rated daytime show, Daniel believed success came from control. Perfect lighting, perfect timing, perfect people. He had built his career by making fast decisions and taking credit for successful ones. People beneath him existed for one purpose: to execute his vision. Marcus and Daniel had tolerated each other for years. Tolerated. Never liked. Marcus didn't flatter executives. Daniel disliked people who couldn't be controlled. Their relationship had remained professionally cold, but manageable. Until 6 months earlier, the network had invested nearly $40 million into a complete modernization of Studio B. New digital control systems, automated camera platforms, artificial intelligence-assisted switching software, state-of-the-art broadcast servers. Executives celebrated. Press releases were issued. Industry magazines praised Horizon as the future of live television. Marcus had concerns. Serious concerns. He raised them repeatedly. The new integrated system depended on a centralized synchronization server. Everything connected to it. Audio, video, lighting, teleprompters, graphics, remote feeds, backup storage, everything. Marcus had spent weeks reviewing installation reports. Something bothered him. There was no true physical redundancy. One central failure point remained. He mentioned it during meetings. Daniel dismissed him. Twice. The engineering department dismissed him. 3 times. Corporate executives dismissed him. Every single time. The system was designed by experts, Daniel had said during one meeting, barely looking up from his tablet. Marcus had answered carefully. Experts make mistakes. Daniel looked directly at him. You're a floor technician, Marcus. Let the engineers handle engineering. The room had laughed politely. Marcus never raised the issue again. But privately he kept notes. Detailed notes. Old military habits. Potential failure scenarios. Backup procedures. Emergency workarounds. He stored everything in a small notebook inside his locker. At home, Marcus lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with his 12-year-old daughter, Ava. Ava was brilliant, funny, relentlessly curious, and the center of Marcus's entire world. Her mother, Jasmine, had died 5 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since then, Marcus had raised Ava alone. School lunches, homework, parent conferences, soccer practice, science fairs. Marcus did all of it. There were difficult days, many of them, but he never complained. Every morning before school, Ava and Marcus ate breakfast together at the tiny kitchen table. It was their ritual. On the morning everything changed, Ava noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You've got your serious face on," she said between bites of cereal. Marcus smiled. "What serious face?" "The one where your eyebrows do this." She demonstrated. Marcus laughed. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You're worried about work again." Children noticed more than adults realized. Marcus sighed. "Big broadcast today." "What kind?" "The governor is coming on the show." Ava nodded seriously. "The important people always make everybody nervous." Marcus smiled. "Something like that." She studied him for another moment. "You'll fix whatever breaks." Marcus looked at his daughter. "Why do you say that?" "Because you always do." He kissed her forehead before leaving. Neither of them knew that would be the last normal conversation they would have for a very long time. Studio B was chaos when Marcus arrived. The governor's interview had attracted unprecedented attention. Additional sponsors, national advertisers, affiliate stations, political analysts, corporate executives. Everyone wanted the broadcast perfect. By noon, the atmosphere inside the control room was tense. Daniel Whitmore moved from station to station issuing instructions. Assistants practically ran behind him. Marcus quietly completed his equipment checks. Camera systems, audio feeds, emergency backups. Everything appeared normal. Mostly. At 1:38 p.m., Marcus noticed something. For less than half a second, one monitor inside master control flickered. Then stabilized. Nobody else saw it. Marcus immediately walked to the central equipment rack. Server synchronization indicators. Normal. Cooling systems. Normal. Network traffic. Slightly elevated. Nothing alarming. Still, something felt wrong. He notified engineering. An exhausted engineer glanced at the diagnostics. No errors showing. Marcus hesitated. "I think we should switch to partial backup mode." The engineer shook his head. "Not before a national broadcast." Marcus looked toward the control room. Daniel was already stressed. Arguing for additional precautions now would create conflict. Marcus returned to the studio floor. The show began at exactly 2 p.m. Everything looked flawless. Opening music. Audience applause. Host introduction. Sponsor messages. Perfect. For 17 minutes. At 2:17 p.m., while the governor was discussing economic policy, every screen in Studio B briefly froze. 1 second. Then recovered. Marcus immediately felt cold. He knew that kind of freeze. Synchronization instability. The exact scenario he had warned about. He grabbed his headset. "Control, this is Floor. We need to transition to backup systems now." Daniel's voice exploded through the headset. "Negative. Stay on assignment." Marcus looked toward camera 2. The robotic platform wasn't tracking smoothly anymore. Tiny hesitation movements. Almost invisible. Almost. "Control, I'm serious. We're losing sync." "No, we're not," Daniel snapped. "Do your job." Marcus made a decision. He stepped toward the technical override station located beside the stage entrance. If he initiated manual segmentation, the audience would never notice. The transition would create 30 seconds of disruption. Maximum. But it would prevent catastrophic failure. Marcus placed his hand on the console. Daniel saw him. "What are you doing?" Daniel shouted across the studio. Marcus looked toward him. "Protecting the broadcast. Step away from that panel." Marcus didn't move. And then everything happened at once. Every screen inside Studio B went black. Every microphone died. Every camera froze. The teleprompter failed. Lighting controls crashed. The entire studio simply stopped. For 3 terrifying seconds, America watched complete silence. Then emergency commercials automatically activated nationwide. Inside Studio B, chaos erupted. People shouted. Producers screamed into dead headsets. Executives stood up. Audience members looked confused. Daniel Whitmore turned toward Marcus. "Furious. Absolutely furious. You caused this." Marcus stared at him. "No. I warned you this would happen." "Security." The word echoed across the silent studio. People stopped moving. 3 security guards entered. Marcus looked around. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended him. Not because they believed Daniel. Because they were afraid. Daniel pointed toward the exit. You are terminated effective immediately. Daniel, one producer started. Daniel silenced him with a look. Escort him out. Marcus looked around the studio he had helped build over 8 years. Nobody met his eyes. He slowly removed his headset, placed it on the nearest table, picked up his jacket, and walked toward the exit without saying a single word. Behind him, millions of dollars of equipment remained dark, and somewhere deep inside Horizon Studios, an invisible countdown had already begun. Marcus didn't look back. He walked through the main lobby carrying nothing except his jacket, lunch bag, and the small notebook he always kept in his backpack. Outside, rain had started falling. Not heavy, just enough to leave dark spots across the pavement. He stood under the awning for several seconds, listening to the distant sound of sirens and city traffic. 8 years. Gone in less than 60 seconds. His phone vibrated. It was Ava. Dad, are you coming to my science presentation tonight? Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Of course I am. You sound tired. Long day. Did work break again? Marcus smiled despite himself. Something like that. You'll fix it. There it was again. That complete, uncomplicated faith children sometimes have in the people they love. Marcus looked back once toward the enormous glass building behind him. No, he said quietly. Not this time. He drove home. For the first time in years, he arrived before sunset. Ava opened the apartment door before he could even knock. You never get home this early. Marcus forced a smile. Looks like I'll be around more often. Ava immediately understood. Children always knew. You got fired. Marcus looked surprised. How did you know? You only make that face when something really bad happens. She paused. Was it your fault? Marcus shook his head. No. Then why did they fire you? Marcus thought for a moment. Because the truth was complicated. They needed someone to blame. Ava considered this seriously. That's not fair. No, Marcus agreed. It isn't. That evening, Marcus sat in the front row of Ava's science fair presentation, while she enthusiastically explained renewable energy to parents who only half understood what she was saying. For 90 minutes, he forgot about Horizon Studios, forgot about Daniel, forgot about being unemployed. He was simply Ava's father, and for a little while that was enough. Back at Horizon Studios, things were not going well. At first, executives believed the outage was temporary. A server restart, system recalibration, maybe an isolated hardware failure. Nothing serious. At 4:40 p.m., engineering teams attempted a full reboot. Nothing. At 5:15, they tried restoring from backup images. Nothing. At 6:03, the lead systems engineer finally admitted something nobody wanted to hear. The entire synchronization architecture had collapsed. Worse, the automated recovery system had failed. Catastrophically. By 7 p.m., Horizon had missed 3 scheduled broadcasts. Affiliate stations across the country were furious. Advertisers demanded explanations. Social media exploded. Competing networks immediately began covering the outage. By 8:30, Horizon Studios was trending nationally. Inside the executive conference room, Daniel Whitmore sat at the far end of the table while senior leadership demanded answers. How long until we're operational? Asked CEO Rebecca Langley. Nobody answered. Rebecca repeated the question. Still nobody spoke. Finally, Chief Engineer Thomas Keller cleared his throat. We don't know. The room became very quiet. What do you mean, you don't know? Rebecca asked. Thomas looked exhausted. The synchronization collapse corrupted portions of the core infrastructure. Restore from backups. We tried. Try again. Thomas hesitated. There may be a larger problem. Rebecca stared at him. What larger problem? Thomas opened a folder. 3 months ago, Marcus Reed submitted a series of internal risk assessments regarding centralized synchronization vulnerabilities. Daniel immediately shifted in his chair. Rebecca looked toward him. Is this true? Daniel answered carefully. Marcus expressed concerns. You ignored them? The concerns were speculative. Thomas spoke before Daniel could continue. They weren't speculative. He slid several documents across the table. Detailed diagrams, failure chains, emergency procedures, manual override protocols, physical segmentation plans, contingency restoration methods. Each report had been signed, dated, filed, and ignored. Rebecca slowly turned pages. Then she looked up. Where is Marcus Reed right now? Daniel didn't answer. Nobody did. At 9:14 p.m., Rebecca learned that Marcus had been terminated on live television less than 7 hours earlier. She stood up so abruptly that several executives visibly flinched. You fired the only person in this building who predicted this exact failure. Daniel attempted damage control. He overstepped authority. He was right. Daniel remained silent. Rebecca looked around the room. Can anyone here restore our systems tonight? No one answered. Again. Silence. Long silence. Finally Thomas spoke. Marcus probably can. The sentence landed like a physical object, because everyone in that room knew it was true. Marcus had spent years documenting unofficial workarounds. Temporary patches. Emergency bypasses. Legacy systems nobody else understood anymore. Entire sections of Horizon's technical infrastructure effectively existed only inside Marcus's head. At 10:02 p.m., Rebecca personally called Marcus. He didn't answer. At 10:15, she called again. No answer. At 10:41, Daniel called. Straight to voicemail. By midnight, Horizon Studios had lost nearly $12 million. The number continued climbing. Meanwhile, Marcus sat at his kitchen table helping Ava finish math homework. His phone remained face down beside him. Eventually Ava noticed. Your phone keeps buzzing. Marcus didn't look. Probably spam. Ava glanced at the screen. It's work. Marcus continued reviewing fractions. They'll figure it out. The phone buzzed again. And again. And again. At 12:36 a.m., there was a knock on the apartment door. Marcus frowned. Nobody visited this late. He opened the door. Standing in the hallway was Thomas Keller. The chief engineer looked terrible. Rain soaked his jacket. His eyes were bloodshot. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Thomas said quietly, "We need your help." Marcus studied him. "You have an entire engineering department." Thomas looked away. "We can't fix it." Marcus said nothing. Thomas continued. The cascade propagated further than anyone anticipated. We can't even isolate the damaged nodes anymore. Marcus already understood. He had predicted exactly this scenario. You didn't implement physical segmentation, Marcus said. Thomas shook his head. No. You left automated synchronization active. Yes. You centralized the backups. Thomas closed his eyes. Yes. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. Then you don't have a synchronization failure. Thomas looked confused. What do we have? Marcus answered immediately. You have a recursive corruption loop. Thomas stared at him. Because that diagnosis explained everything. Every failed reboot. Every corrupted restoration. Every unsuccessful recovery attempt. Thomas spoke quietly. Can you stop it? Marcus was silent for several seconds. Finally. Probably. Thomas released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Please come back. Marcus looked past him toward the dark parking lot. I don't work for Horizon anymore. Marcus. No. Thomas stopped. Marcus had never interrupted people. Ever. But tonight was different. You all had months. Thomas lowered his head. Marcus continued. I warned everyone. I know. You laughed. Thomas said nothing. Daniel humiliated me in front of millions of people. I know. Marcus folded his arms. And now you're standing outside my apartment because suddenly my opinion matters. Thomas looked genuinely ashamed. Yes. For a long moment, only rain could be heard. Finally Thomas said, if this outage continues until morning, 600 employees may lose their jobs. Marcus looked at him. Thomas continued. Affiliate contracts will collapse. Advertising penalties alone could cripple the company. Marcus remained expressionless. Thomas took a breath. I'm not asking for Horizon. He looked toward the apartment where Ava could be seen doing homework at the kitchen table. I'm asking for everyone who had nothing to do with what happened. Marcus followed his gaze. He thought about camera operators, custodians, receptionists, editors, assistants, the ordinary people, the invisible people, people exactly like him. He hated that Thomas had used that argument, because it was the one argument that might actually work. Marcus looked back at him. Who's in charge right now? Rebecca Langley. The CEO? Yes. Tell her if I come in, I set the conditions. Thomas nodded immediately. Anything. Marcus shook his head. No, not anything. He looked directly at Thomas. Everything. Thomas didn't hesitate. Done. Marcus glanced toward Ava. She had been quietly listening the entire time. Dad. Marcus smiled faintly. Looks like work broke again. Ava grinned. I knew you'd fix it. Marcus looked toward the rain-covered city beyond the apartment complex. Somewhere downtown, an entire network was waiting. And for the first time in Horizon Studios' history, the people at the top were about to discover exactly how valuable the man they had treated as invisible truly was. Marcus arrived at Horizon Studios at 2:11 a.m. The parking lot looked different. Normally, at that hour, only a handful of vehicles remained. Tonight, every space near the executive entrance was occupied. News vans lined the street. Portable lights illuminated the front of the building. Rumors of a catastrophic technical failure had already spread across the industry. Thomas escorted Marcus through a side entrance. The moment they stepped inside, conversation stopped. People turned. Some looked relieved. Some embarrassed. A few couldn't meet his eyes at all. Marcus ignored all of it. He had not come back for applause. The executive conference room was waiting. Inside sat Rebecca Langley, 3 board members, senior engineering staff, legal counsel, and Daniel Whitmore. Rebecca stood immediately. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. Marcus remained standing. I haven't agreed to help yet. Nobody spoke. Marcus looked directly at Rebecca. You said I set the conditions. Yes. Condition 1. Every employee terminated because of this outage gets reinstated immediately. Rebecca nodded. Done. Condition 2. No employee loses compensation because of this shutdown. Another nod. Done. Condition 3. Engineering decisions involving infrastructure will no longer be made exclusively by executives. Several board members exchanged looks. Rebecca said nothing for a moment. Then, agreed. Marcus turned toward Daniel. The executive producer had aged visibly in just a few hours. Marcus spoke calmly. If I restore your network, nobody publicly blames floor staff or technicians for tonight. Rebecca answered before Daniel could. Agreed. Marcus looked around the room. One final condition. Everyone waited. After this is over, I decide whether I return. Silence. Rebecca slowly nodded. That's fair. Marcus finally placed his backpack on the conference table. Good. He opened it, removed his small notebook, and placed it in front of the executives. For years, people had ignored that notebook. Tonight, the future of Horizon Studios depended on it. Marcus walked directly into master control. The room looked like a disaster zone. Exhausted engineers sat surrounded by empty coffee cups and diagnostic reports. Dozens of screens displayed error messages. Marcus studied the monitors for less than 30 seconds. Then he started giving instructions. Disconnect synchronization server 3 physically. Confused looks. Now, people moved. Disable automated restoration protocols. More confusion. Thomas hesitated. We already tried. Marcus interrupted. That's the problem. He walked toward the central equipment rack. The system is repairing itself incorrectly. Several engineers gathered around. Marcus began explaining. When synchronization collapsed, the recovery software copied corrupted timing data across every backup node. He pointed toward one screen. Every reboot reintroduces the corruption. Thomas stared. Recursive corruption loop. Marcus nodded. Exactly. An engineer frowned. How do we stop it? Marcus answered immediately. We stopped trying to save the system. The room became quiet. Marcus continued. We isolate every surviving clean node manually. One engineer looked horrified. That could take days. Marcus shook his head. No. He opened his notebook. We built hidden redundancy pathways during the old analog transition 6 years ago. Blank faces. Nobody remembered. Marcus wasn't surprised. Most of the people who installed those systems had long since retired. Marcus had helped them, and he had taken notes. Detailed notes. For 8 years. He began assigning teams. Section A, physical isolation. Section B, legacy routing activation. Section C, manual synchronization verification. For the next 4 hours, Horizon Studios transformed. The hierarchy disappeared. Executives carried cables. Senior producers moved equipment. Engineers crawled beneath raised flooring. Nobody argued. Nobody complained. Marcus moved continuously. Calm. Focused. Precise. Exactly the way he had operated his entire career. At 4:53 a.m., they restored audio infrastructure. At 5:26, partial video capability returned. At 6:14, national affiliates regained limited connectivity. Applause erupted throughout Master Control. Marcus didn't celebrate. We're not finished. By sunrise, exhaustion had settled over everyone. Rebecca entered Master Control carrying coffee. She handed one to Marcus. How bad was it? Marcus looked at the monitor wall. Worse than you realize. Rebecca sat beside him. Explain. Marcus hesitated. Then he pointed toward the synchronization architecture displayed on screen. You invested $40 million into modernization. Yes. You eliminated redundancy because redundancy isn't profitable. Rebecca remained silent. Marcus continued. You built a system optimized for quarterly reports. He looked directly at her. Not survival. Rebecca absorbed this. Because she knew he was right. For years, Horizon had prioritized efficiency. Lower costs. Fewer employees. More automation. Less human oversight. Marcus took a sip of coffee. Systems fail. He said it simply. They always do. Rebecca quietly asked. Why did you stay so long? Marcus thought about it. The people. Rebecca nodded. She understood. At 7:42 a.m., national broadcasting capability returned. One by one, screens across Master Control came alive. Live feeds. Affiliate stations. News reports. Advertisements. Everything. The room exploded. People cheered. Some cried. Others simply sat down, overwhelmed. Several employees hugged each other. Thomas looked at Marcus. You did it. Marcus shook his head. No. He looked around the room. We did. At exactly 8 a.m., Horizon Studios returned to live broadcasting. The outage had lasted just under 18 hours. Industry analysts would later call it one of the most significant technical recoveries in modern television history. But inside Horizon Studios, another crisis remained unresolved. Daniel Whitmore was waiting outside Master Control. Alone. Marcus saw him immediately. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Daniel said, I owe you an apology. Marcus remained quiet. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Deeply uncomfortable. I was wrong. Marcus said nothing. Daniel continued. I should have listened. Still nothing. I let my ego make decisions. The words clearly cost him something. Marcus finally spoke. Why did you fire me? Daniel looked away. Because when everything failed, I panicked. He swallowed. And because you challenged me in front of people. Marcus nodded slowly. It wasn't surprising. Power often reacted badly when challenged publicly. Even when challenged correctly. Daniel looked genuinely exhausted. I'm sorry. Marcus studied him. For the first time, Daniel looked less like an executive and more like a frightened, aging man who had watched his career nearly disappear overnight. Marcus extended his hand. After a brief moment, Daniel shook it. The gesture wasn't dramatic. It wasn't friendship. It was simply two men deciding not to carry something any longer. Later that morning, Rebecca held a company-wide meeting. Nearly 600 employees filled Studio B. The same studio where Marcus had been publicly fired less than 24 hours earlier. Rebecca stood on stage. Behind her stood Marcus. When employees saw him, spontaneous applause erupted. It lasted almost a full minute. Many people stood. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He always had. Rebecca eventually raised her hand. The room quieted. Yesterday, she said, this company failed. Nobody moved. We failed technically. She paused. And we failed morally. Complete silence. Rebecca continued. One employee warned us repeatedly. She looked toward Marcus. We ignored him. More silence. We then blamed him for our mistakes. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca didn't care. That ends today. The audience erupted again. Rebecca announced immediate organizational reforms. Infrastructure oversight committees. Mandatory redundancy standards. Employee advisory boards. Technical review protections. Anonymous safety reporting. Every recommendation Marcus had made over the years. Implemented. Immediately. When the meeting ended, employees surrounded Marcus. Camera operators. Receptionists. Editors. Maintenance workers. People he had worked beside for years. People who simply wanted to say thank you. Near noon, Marcus finally left the building. Outside, reporters waited. Microphones appeared instantly. Mr. Reed, are you returning to Horizon? How much money were you offered? Do you feel vindicated? Marcus paused, then answered honestly. I haven't decided. The reporters looked disappointed. They wanted drama. Marcus gave them truth instead. My value didn't change yesterday when I was fired. He looked back toward the building, and it didn't change today because people suddenly noticed it. With that, he walked away. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table while Ava finished homework. "Did you save television?" she asked. Marcus laughed. "No. Then what did you do?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I reminded some people that every job matters." Ava considered this. "Even invisible jobs?" Marcus smiled. "Especially invisible jobs." Ava nodded. "Because to children, some truths are obvious." Later, after Ava had gone to bed, Marcus stood beside the apartment window overlooking the city. His phone rang. It was Rebecca. Marcus answered. "We like you back," she said. Marcus looked out across the lights. Understood. There was a pause. Rebecca waited. Finally she asked, "What's your decision?" Marcus smiled slightly. For years, other people had decided his worth. Not anymore. This time, the choice belonged entirely to him. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough.